functional, social, strategic, and emotional competence skills as well. And not only each of those individually, but how to integrate them across settings so they can be as successful as possible. We also know that it's going to be extremely important to be including family-centered services. So we don't want to just be working in our own silos, whether it's in a classroom or in a therapy room. We want to make sure that we are doing our best to include families and family members as well. All right, so let's go over a little bit about what we know about bilingual intervention. So first and foremost, if we take a step back and look at our presentation title for today, we talked about bilingual AAC and bilingual intervention. If you start to go through the literature and looking at bilingual research, the terminology is going to be pretty heterogeneous. You're going to hear different terms like multilingual, dual language learner, and I'm forgetting the rest of them right now, but you're going to see a lot of different terminology being used. And so Yvonne and I picked bilingual just because we felt like it was the most salient term that people recognize when we're discussing individuals who are learning more than one language. I think that it's moving towards more multilingual to be inclusive of individuals who are learning more than just 2 languages, sometimes 3. We might even consider our bilingual AAC users to be multilingual because they have to learn an AAC system, Spanish, English, or whatever their home language is. So multilingual is probably a little bit more encompassing, but I think bilingual is a little bit more recognizable across our fields. But when we look into our bilingual intervention and what we know so far, we do know that we have to assess in both languages to really truly identify a bilingual or multilingual language or speech disorder. We also know that to facilitate language development and speech development and to be as efficient as possible, we want to do that in all languages. We know how important it is to collaborate and work closely with interpreters and other support staff whenever possible and when we have those resources available to us. And we also want to make sure that our services are culturally responsive, that we are acknowledging and being inclusive with the home culture of our students and individuals that we're working with. And again, just like with AAC intervention, we want it to be family-centered whenever possible, because that's when we're going to, as many people as we have on board supporting that student or that individual using an AAC device, the more successful they're going to be in the long run. Yvonne and I have a very close colleague who always says it takes a village, it takes an AAC village. And so we also know it takes a bilingual AAC village. And so as many people that we have on board as possible, it's going to be the best. It's going to be the best for that individual in the long run. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what we know about bilingual AAC intervention. And unfortunately, there's some aspects that are going to be 1 + 1 = 2 in the sense of what we can take what we know about AAC intervention plus what we know about bilingual intervention and incorporate those components into what we're doing with a bilingual AAC intervention. But it's not always going to be that case. So we want to take some time to go over a little bit about what we know. What we do know is that it's grossly under-researched. I'm sure nobody here is shocked by that. One of the lit reviews that we reviewed made sure to highlight that and that how important it is to rely on expert opinion because we just really don't have a lot available to us. And so, and just like with bilingual intervention, it's important that we assess and treat in all languages. So when we're doing our AAC evaluations, we're making sure that we are doing our best to provide a system that is available in both languages. Like Yvonne was talking about, today, it's going to be very heavily focused on supporting Spanish, English, bilingual AAC users, but we are very well aware of the diversity of needs in terms of languages across the board. And so we just want to make sure that we're assessing and providing a system in all languages that student needs access to. And then a big portion of what we're going to be talking about today is treating in all languages and how do we do that. We also know when we are providing bilingual AAC intervention that if we are not a bilingual provider, that we want to collaborate with interpreters and other support staff as much as we can. Like I was mentioning earlier, we want to be making sure that our AAC systems provide access to, I wrote both, but really all languages that a student is exposed to. And to the best of our ability, we want to make sure that those AAC systems are providing culturally relevant symbols and vocabulary. and are in the dialect of that student. We know that family or home and school collaboration is crucial. We really want to be looking at how can we work together? How can we work smarter and not harder? We want to be able to collaborate between educators and families. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but how we can co-construct communication practices that really honor the child's background. And so one of the articles that we looked at talked about reciprocal, reciprocal engagement and carryover. So basically, how can we collaborate with the family effectively? And so Yvonne and I are going to go over some very practical strategies and ideas on how to do that a little bit later on. We know for service delivery as well that what's going to be most successful in terms of like looking at the school setting is going to be a push-in model, so that we are able to support the use of all the modes of that student, and all of their languages and dialects are being supported in those services that are being provided. All right. So in addition to that, some other strategies that we want to be looking at in terms of supporting bilingual AAC intervention. The first is an ethnographic interviewing. So how do we take that information from that last slide and start to put it into practice? So ethnographic interviewing is basically just a way of doing a more in-depth parent interview, or collecting background information or some kind of developmental history. So these are things that you're probably already doing if you're supporting AAC users. So it might look like including questions like, how do you know when your child wants something? How do they communicate their wants and needs to you? How do they express their emotions to you? So what does communication look like at home? And so when we're doing those interviews, making sure that we are either giving the parent a survey or questionnaire that's in their home language, or collaborating with an interpreter, or translating forms. So getting that information about like that qualitative information about what do those home interactions look like? Because that can be really supporting what you're doing at school. Because if they already have a method or a way of communicating their emotions at home, how can you build off of that when you're working in the school setting? The next thing that we know is going to be really effective is like we talked about, that collaboration piece and having communication logs and making sure that they're multi-directional, and not just that the school's sending home updates, but that we as educators are working towards finding a system that's going to work with what we're doing. So that way there can be a back and forth communication. So that's going to look like setting up some kind of system where families and educators can share daily, hopefully daily, but at least some kind of regular updates. It could be pictures, a written note, a voice note. It could be communicating what they wanted to eat that day, preferred activities for that day. Did they initiate communication? Did they get excited about anything? How did you ensure that they were that they understood what you were telling them, or how did they convey back to you that that student understood what you were saying? And then we also want to develop protocols for consent and dissent. So one thing that's really important, so when we're doing these ethnographic interviews, is that we're figuring out a way. So this is just a very fancy word, a very fancy bullet point to say that every student should have a yes and a no. So I'm sure that you are all aware of that as you're here today supporting our AAC users. And so through that ethnographic interviewing, finding out, how does your child convey if they want to do something, or if they're over something, like what does their body language look like? What kind of gestures are they using? Are they verbalizing it to you? So making sure that they have a true yes or no, so that can be something that's carried over at school or in the clinic as well. And then the last strategy that we will be infusing throughout our presentation today is talking about something called TrueDL. So I'm sure a lot of you have already heard about UDL, or Universal Design for Learning. And Yvonne and I are going to talk a little bit more about what TrueDL is, which is Translanguaging Universal Design for Learning. And so what that means is that we are going to utilize ways to incorporate all languages of the child. And so that is going to look like giving them opportunities to respond in whatever language that they feel most comfortable, providing input and opportunities, so providing that bilingual AAC intervention. And it's also going to be inclusive of whatever modes that they want to use as well. So we know as AAC providers that we're going to accept all modalities of communication. And so if they're already gesturing or nodding or shaking their head, we're not going to have them reiterate that on their device. And so it's really just accepting all modes of communication and making sure that we're supporting that home language. So TrueDL is just an umbrella term that's encompassing all of those concepts.
All right, thank you, Rui. So why are we here? We're here because we want to support my multilingual users the way they need to be supported, right? Honoring their culture and their language. And the next couple of slides are going to be touching on the last two things Rui mentioned about the ethnographic interview and the multi-directional communication. There we go. And so with our, why do we need all of this? Why is this important? Well, if you look at the Communication Bill of Rights, it starts with the right to interact socially and build relationships, and that begins at home, right? How many of our students, even our kids that are multilingual and maybe not AAC users, we don't foster that bilingualism, that translanguaging, and they reach to an age where they can communicate with their own families. If you add that the second layer of, communication difficulties just using AAC, that really disrupts their ability to build those relationships at home, right? And then the Bill of Rights, Communication Bill of Rights, ends with they have the right to have a clear, meaningful, and culturally linguistically appropriate communication. And that is the right to access all the languages they speak whenever they want to speak it. Another big reason why we're here today is that we want our students to be accurately identified. I don't know how many of you have had the experience of meeting a student that has an educational label or eligibility of mild, moderate, or severe intellectual disability, and then you happen to introduce them to AAC, and lo and behold, they can read and they can type. And these kids have these educational labels where people's expectations for them are really, really low, but it's because we don't have, until now, maybe will happen in the future, but we don't have great cognitive measurements for students that have limited access to verbal speech. And the way we assess the students that have very complex bodies, they have issues with motor planning, with attending, sometimes vision can be involved. So that would impact their testing. So we wanna give them the tools so they can be accurately identified and then provided with education services that really meet their needs. And the last thing is supporting all languages. We know that we have research, we have evidence-based practices that encompass the lived experiences of individuals, the research, and then also clinical experience, all of that together telling us that when we support L1, it's going to help L2 and L1 together, they both develop faster, they will accelerate. So there's all the reasons to support it. So how do we do this? And Rui talked about the ethnographic interviewing. So we have this home and school collaboration, and we want it to be a multi-directional one where we are co-constructing and learning together about language and culture, because we know those two are intertwined. So we have the All About Me survey, and here is a little star on the top right corner that tells us this is in the Padlet. So we already talked about All About Me survey. It's bilingual. We have the home language questionnaire that looks at input, the family language, do they code switch at home, what languages are spoken, it's all inclusive. And then the last piece right there, the personal communication dictionaries that I personally love, just knowing how our students communicate through all modalities, right? Not just do they have an AC system, but some kids are very effective at communicating at home and having their needs met without the use of that AAC, because they have the gestures, they have these modified signs that the family just reads them like a book. How can we share that knowledge across settings to increase our collaboration and communication and help the student be more successful across settings? So I have a question for you guys. If you can look in the poll, it's going to be asking you well, actually have two questions. How many multilingual AAC users do you currently support? That would be one of the questions, but we also have another one asking you, how do you currently communicate with your families in whatever setting you support them? If you guys can look into that poll. Is it letting you open it? Oh, there it is. All right, so I'm seeing over 50% says 1 to 5 multilingual AAC users. Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't see where the poll is.
It should pop up on your screen. Christine, I don't know if you can help us with this.
Oh, it did just, oh, that's when I first entered it did that. Okay.
Okay, sorry about that. There's a second poll asking, how do you currently communicate with your families in whatever setting you're working on? It should be the second poll.
And I did not see that one pop up. And then also these forms say I need access. Oh, here's the second one.
Okay.
These forms that you have posted, like the family language and history form.
They should all be in the Padlet, and from the Padlet, you should be able to access them. Maybe with the hyperlink is not letting you do that. We can check on that, right, Rue? And
What
make sure
about,
that
so the first form, the one that says a copy of All About Me, it's going to make you do a forced copy. And so if you just click make copy, it should let you make one. And then the second one, let's see, I'll go over here. So we go over to the Padlet.
Or make a copy.
I'm over here. If I click on this one, it should, that way you can make your own copy of the form. And so if I click make copy, it should open it up for you. It might take a second. And so this is what it looks like. And so this is like what Yvonne was talking about, collecting some of that ethnographic information just about interests and who's living at home, family traditions, funny things that I do or how I make people laugh. And so it's a bilingual form. Everything, all questions are in both Spanish and English as well.
Yeah, so the family language won't let me make a copy because
All
I
right.
need access. FYI.
Okay, so then I'll have to fix that link. And then I can do that a little bit later. All right, so, but those are on there and should be accessible. And I'll fix those links so that people can make their own copies later on.
Thank you, Kristen. Yeah, so on the second poll, I'm seeing 77% of you guys are communicating via email or text messaging. 44% is other. It'd be interesting to see what that is. 25% of you through a messaging app or website. 9% using a notebook. There's nothing wrong with good old paper and pencil. And a digital printed newsletter, 10% of you. Thank you for that info. Okay, just share the results so you guys have that too. Okay. And other use an interpreter. Thank you. Yes. Awesome. So on my next slide, I'm talking about some of the resources that we found. So here's a list of all some of the messaging websites and apps that can help with multi-directional communication. All of this instantly translate to multiple languages, allowing for a more seamless experience. And you can contact your sites and your schools, see which one would be compatible with your school. Maybe some of them I believe are free, but some might require a school subscription or a group subscription. And make sure to get that parent permission for electronic communication and to take photos or videos if you're going to be sharing videos. And if it's not something that is already HIPAA or FERPA compliant, just have to be very mindful. I've included a media release for caregiver collaboration. I believe I left it open, but if the link is not opening for you guys, just let us know and I'll make sure that it stays open. And this is just a guidance. It does not mean that I'm giving legal advice. It's just a guidance on how to create your own media release. And I know in my district, part of the registration forms includes a media release for anything related to the school. Another place where I usually have parents sign permission is when I am personalizing AAC devices and I'm taking pictures of the peers in classroom. just making sure that parents are aware that I will be taking a picture of their child's face and then putting it on someone else's device. So just to make sure that we keep our kids safe and their information confidential. So another way to communicate, thank you, Roy. Another way to communicate with families that doesn't require a cell phone or a computer is the student's AAC device. We created this beautiful document with clear instructions and some videos on how to use messages and share news. And this is particularly useful during like morning circle meetings when students are sharing about their weekend experiences or talking about their plans for the weekend. Just really builds on that engagement and that participation, you know, and talk about buy-in for students to be able to talk about something they feel comfortable with. And something that I try to emphasize with families, that they can record these messages in whatever language they feel more comfortable with. You know, it's a way of showcasing that their language, the language they use at home, and also honoring that, you know, there's language differences and everything is accepted in the schools. So it's just another way of doing it. So something that that we need to keep in mind is how do we support long-term use of bilingual AAC users? Because we know that device abandonment is a reality. Like that's something we see. And when you add that bilingual piece, it feels like it's another layer that that we need to account for. So we know there are some factors that can mitigate the device abandonment, right? One of those would be having those knowledgeable communication partners. How do we do that? We have so many communication partners that might be a little bit afraid of worry about technology. So we want to find ourselves in, you know, empowering these families and providing the training and the supports in their home language to feel comfortable with the technology. I don't know if you encounter families that they tell you the student has a device and you have to go through all of these images on your phone and showing, is it this one? Is it this one? Showcasing the different home screens until they find the one that their kid uses, because they don't have a document that says my AAC system has a language name, blah, blah, blah. So how do we share this information, make it readily available for parents, and also help them provide with resources that will make them more comfortable in supporting AAC users? Like I said, the next one is supporting families and AAC users in their home language, and making sure that these systems, and Rui mentioned this before, but it's worth emphasizing, the systems have symbols that look like them: skin color, culture, routines and activities outside of the school that are important and relevant to their families, and making sure we find those voices that sound like them, right? Is it Spanish with a Puerto Rican accent? Is it Spanish like Dominican accent? Is it a Mexican accent, a Venezuelan accent, an accent from Spain? It's just making sure that we take those into consideration when we are personalizing to help that long-term use for those bilingual AAC users. Is there anything you want to add about this, Rui? Because I know you work a lot with families in their homes.
No, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about it when we go into looking at our bilingual AAC systems and vocabulary. So like Yvonne was mentioning, we want to make sure that we are giving our students, our bilingual students, AAC options that are going to be the best fit for them. So the first thing that we're going to be looking at is making sure that it has, when we look at the linguistic organization or how the system or vocabulary application is organized, we want to make sure that it was created for Spanish speakers and that it's not just a direct translation of another system. There's a lot of really great tools out there that can translate documents and systems pretty easily, but we want to make sure that it's really created for the Spanish language or whatever the home language is. We also want to make sure that there is access and easy access to both languages. Like we talked about that TrueDL, being able to communicate in whatever language that they want to communicate in, and how easy is it to code switch. So a lot of systems that are bilingual have a toggle feature where you can go back and forth between Spanish and English. And later on, we're going to talk about how to target that as an operational skill. We also want to look at the voice options and how easy it is to edit and put in pronunciations. of different words. And so, and also looking at pronunciation of code switched utterances. So if a lot of them don't have this feature yet, but I've asked for it. I keep asking for it to the different device manufacturers. So if you start with a phrase in English, like I want, and you go to the other side and you put in a word in another language. And so if you finish on the Spanish side, it's going to say the entire sentence with a Spanish accent. But if you start on the, if you end on the English side, it'll be vice versa. And so it doesn't, none of the systems yet code which word that you entered in what language you enter that word in. And so that's something that I keep advocating for. And so hopefully with technology and advances, that's something that we'll be seeing sooner rather than later, but for a lot of systems, it's not available yet. And like Yvonne was mentioning, do we have diverse symbols and do we have diverse options? Can we edit things? Can we edit skin tone, hair color so that the device looks and sounds like me? When I'm doing when I do the AAC evaluations, their families then receive training on how to configure and set up the devices and how to support them at home. And a lot of times it's a huge turnoff to them when they open up a vocabulary program or app, and there's a lot of words that are just not in the same dialect. And so if I can go through and show them how to edit it, and to make those changes so that it sounds like how they speak at home, there's going to be a lot more buy-in in that. And so that brings up our next point. It's really important to think about programming. And this is where I think that there's a lot of differences between supporting English AAC users and bilingual AAC users. And unfortunately, it's going to be double the work. I'm just going to tell you up front. You know, when we're initially setting up the app, like I mentioned earlier, we want to make sure that we have the appropriate voices selected and that they are set up and connected to the corresponding language side. So making sure whatever system that you're in, that your English side is matched to your English voice and vice versa. It can get kind of funny and entertaining in the beginning, but annoying later on down the line for our users when they aren't working correctly. When I'm doing my home trainings and I'm setting up the system, I want to make, I'll ask the parent what language they want the system settings in. And a lot of parents will want Spanish, but there's a handful that will tell me, well, I'm so used to having it in English because that's what my phone is like, even though I don't speak English. That's how I know how to find everything. So whatever the parent wants is what I'm going to set it up for. The other thing, just to make editing a lot easier, is I'm going to go into the system settings and add an additional keyboard for whatever the home language is. So I'm primarily supporting Spanish. So I want to make sure that I have access to both English and Spanish when I'm editing to make that a lot easier. So that way I have accents and things are spelled correctly. Then when I go into programming and editing devices, the first thing that I'm going to look at is teaching the parents how to add pages. Especially with family. A lot of the individuals I work with have very, very big extended families. And so being able to add pictures of them, to talk about them, and when they're going to visit them is very motivating for them to do. Adding like their favorites, like mis comidas or my foods. So that way they have their favorite things in there. The unfortunate side about bilingual programming is that, and a lot of my parents always sigh when I tell them this, is that it's not just because you program it in on the English or the Spanish side, it's not going to show up on the opposite side. So I really wish it did. But so that's where sometimes it's going to be double the work. And I always ask either the family or the individual as well, like, do you want this in both Spanish and English, or do you want it in just one? And the other thing, like I mentioned earlier, is just being aware of dialectical and regional differences, and you'll want to edit those as needed. So, for example, beber or drink might be programmed into the system. And a lot of our families down here in Arizona will use tomar instead of beber to drink, to say drink. And so that's something that I would want to change and add in. And so it's just, it's those little things that can really make it feel more like theirs. It's like if we were to get an AAC device that was made for British English, like if it had flat instead of apartment or biscuit instead of cookie, like you get the idea, but it's just really not the best fit. So those are just some things to be thinking of when we're setting up our devices. And it sounds like somebody mentioned in the chat that there's, there are other systems out there that are taking that into consideration. And so it sounds like Flex Speak will add words in both languages. So that's really great to hear. All right, let me go back here. So as you can already start to figure out, there's going to be some limitations with bilingual AAC. A lot of those English, our English systems are created for mainstream dialects. So if we're thinking about the diversity of our caseloads, we don't have African-American English or other dialects included. It's really the mainstream dialect that's prioritized. Not all systems are going to give the options to customize skin tones or voices to match the home dialect. You might only have Spain Spanish instead of like Mexican Spanish or Latino American Spanish. And as we all have already figured out, we have limited languages available. Like Spanish is growing and we do have some options. It's probably like the language that has the most options available, but we have very limited options available for other languages, unfortunately. And as you know, if you work with bilingual populations, you probably already know that Spanish has many dialects, and a lot of times our AAC systems only have one, maybe two of those dialects. So just things to be aware of. And I tell my parents, like, they start picking things apart, and I'm like, I know there's no perfect system and we got to work with what we have for right now, but I do appreciate their feedback and I always pass it along because the one day we're going to have more features on our system. So I think valuing that parent feedback and making sure you're sharing that with, those app creators and device manufacturers is really important as well, because these are the populations that we're supporting. And if we don't advocate for them, we're not going to see any advancement in our AAC options. So like I was mentioning earlier, that programming is really going to take time. And it's something that, we're going to want to invest a little bit up front. But also it's going to be this ongoing process. But like I mentioned, the more that device looks and sounds like that bilingual AAC user, the more willing the family will be to support that device, and the more that child or that individual will want to use that device as well. And so how can we work smarter, not harder, when we are programming devices and personalizing them? So one thing is, like we mentioned, is like using those parent questionnaires and like, all those surveys that we were talking about earlier, like with their those ethnographic interviews, collecting that information. You already have some like word lists probably that you want to make sure that you're incorporating into the devices. You also want to train individuals. Like, you don't want everybody editing the device, and you want to be making sure that you're working very closely with the parent. But you want to train, specific individuals to help with updating and programming in that device. So I know that when I do my home trainings, I try to get a couple of siblings involved as well to help with that programming piece. At school, you might see if there are some parapros or other teachers that are interested in learning how to update and program to make sure that it has what it needs. And so when you're doing this, we want to think about how can we incorporate this into what we're already doing. So if you are doing some kind of parent interview, if you have like school enrollment paperwork, doing, through other communication apps. So like if you already have systems in place where you're collecting information from the parent, maybe just adding a couple of questions in that have to do with student preferences to get a better idea of like how you might customize the device, or asking about family experiences, or maybe you might not have time to do an entire questionnaire, but can you add in a couple of questions to what you already are doing so you can work smarter and not harder. All right. So this is not an extensive list by any means, but these are just some examples of bilingual systems that are currently available. So robust systems, so those that can support multiple access methods. We have PRC Unidad, which is based off of their Unity program. There's also bilingual Spanish to English LAMP words for life. Saltillo has word power and multi-chat. TD Snap has a couple of vocabularies, and then Smartbox and Grid 3 as well. And then we have a number of apps. And so I'm glad, I think that this list in particularly has grown over the last few years, and we are really happy to see. and I think somebody was talking about Flex Speak earlier on, and I know that they support a number of languages aside from just Spanish and English. So the list is growing, but there's definitely a lot more room for advancement. And so this is also linked on the app or on our Padlet as well, if you want a list of what's out there. So when we are looking at systems for our bilingual AAC users, we definitely want to provide them some kind of robust option, you know, some kind of device or application if possible, but there's still a lot of value in using core boards. We know that we are not always going to have access to our systems. And so like learning how to use backups can be really valuable. The other thing, you know, I work in a high school setting. And so something else that I'll have students do is, you know, they have their robust app, but sometimes they don't always want to use it, or it's hard, you know, if they're in a hallway and it's hard to pull out of their backpack. I have them download just a phrase-based or, you know, word-based app to their phone that's free. And so one of my favorites is Google Translate, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to use that in a little bit here. But that one can go back and forth between Spanish and English if they have some good literacy skills. And then like Vocable and TD Talk are available as well, but they're only available in English. And then we also want to be using visual supports while we're teaching, looking at how, you know, how to support our AAC users learning how to use their devices and choice boards. So just giving them multiple modalities to access language is going to be important, and just thinking about how we can incorporate that for our bilingual AAC users.
Okay, fun times. Spanish review. Of course, we could have like whole presentation just talking about the aspects of Spanish, right? But we'll do just a quick review. So things to take into consideration. Subject in Spanish can be part of the verb, like the example there, I eat, como, you eat, comes, right? It's part of it. That's why it's a pro-drop language, meaning that pronouns can be dropped depending on the context. We have to be mindful of reflexive verbs, and those are the verbs that they can be marked at the beginning or at the end of the word. And when talking about a subject performing the action for themselves, it's when we're going to use that reflexive verb. And it's very useful when you're thinking about routines or activities or commands. For example, if I say, I bathe, so me ducho o me baño, you have that me, that me. Or you get dressed, te vistes. It's going to lie down, like you're talking about a stuff in your line, you're putting it down, it's going to lie down, so be va a dormirse. So just mindful of that. I know reflexive verbs can be challenging. Also think about gender and number agreement, because that's going to impact not only the noun, but also the article, right? For example, the dogs will change to los perros as opposed to el perro, which would be the singular form. So both the article and the noun change due to gender and number agreement. And last but not least, syntax and word order. So in English, our questions, you know, we can use helper verbs like do, did, does, that will help you formulate a question, but you also have those word reversals, like saying it is jumping, and then asking, is it jumping? And you have that flip. And in Spanish, it's mostly a statement that just has that change in prosody or intonation. And I actually have a funny story about that. I work with a lot of bilingual children, not only AAC users, but just kids also with developmental language disorders. And I had this kid who would ask me, he will come up to me and say, Miss, I can go to the bathroom. I'd be like, yeah, we can all go to the bathroom, but do you need to go to the bathroom? Be like, yeah. It's like, okay, remember in English, we have to switch those words around and say, can you? Otherwise, you're just telling me that you can do something. So that's just a reminder that in Spanish, you have the change in prosody, but not necessarily a change in word order. And for the negation, that usually happens before the verb. So in the case of Marta is not my sister, the verb is, and not comes after. And in the Spanish translation, the negation comes before the verb of the action word. So Marta no es mi hermana. Yo no voy a la escuela. So it comes right before that. Fun times with this. So we have some bilingual tools, so you don't lose your mind. We have all of the Microsoft productivity and Google productivity tools include this translation piece in there. So if you look at Word documents, Docs, Google Docs, Google Slides, Microsoft PowerPoint, they have embedded these translation tools for multiple languages, not just Spanish. We also really like using wordreference.com, Spanish Direct, and Context Reverso to help you not only find the translation for the words, but phrases and examples of how that word is utilized in different contexts. So we like looking at all of those sources just to check on your translations. And of course, we always want to leverage cultural and linguistic brokers in your community, such as, you know, bilingual support staff and other interpreters. And this is just a reminder to, you know, ask to have access to interpreters in the creation of materials, and just, and you know, making sure that whatever you're presenting, whatever you are using with your bilingual AAC users and families is correct. And all of these resources are in the Padlet. So now Rui is going to talk to us about AI.
All right, so we're going to go over some different tools that are available. I know that there have been recent presentations that have kind of covered AI tools for educators, and we're going to be looking at how we can leverage AI for supporting our bilingual users. So we have different types of AI. We have chatbots, or where you can ask questions. So we have some free examples are Microsoft Copilot, Google Gemini, ChatGPT. Some other fun ideas that you can incorporate into therapy, if you haven't already, is the AI picture generation. So that can be really powerful and motivating for students. And so Canva, Adobe, and Sora are some different options for doing that. And then some of our favorite tools that we like using, like I mentioned, we have Google Translate. And then there's some other AI translators like through DeepL, and then WordVice are great options if you just need something quick and easy. And I will and we by no means want to replace our bilingual providers. I think that it's possible to replace bilingual providers with using these online tools. But if you are a monolingual provider, we just want to give you some other things that are available on how you can be supporting both languages. And so there's a number of other AI tools that will translate documents and adjust reading levels. So like Brisk Teaching, and then Magic School AI has a text translator tool if you want just, and it's not going to be perfect. We'll go over that later on. Like they're not perfect tools, but it can at least get you on the right path of getting the gist of things to parents. Some other tools that we like to use are Natural Reader. Oh, I have this on here, or I have these on here more than once. And then, so if we're looking for text to speech options in Spanish, so if you want something read out to you, so we've the Natural Reader and Google Translate. All right, so we want to look a little bit. So one of my favorite things is using Google Translate for a variety of things. We can use it in therapy if we want to be providing that audio input to students. Like I said, I like using it as a quick and dirty option if they just want to pull out their phone and communicate something to the teacher. But we just wanted to show you how quick, and if you don't have it on your phone already, if you're not already using this, it's a really great feature. So this is just showing the audio didn't pick up, but we did voice to text. I like it. And then how quickly it shows up. And then the nice thing is here with Google Translate, you can either one, you can have it be spoken out loud. So I have students who are just English speaking and they just type text in here, and they can click the volume here, this icon here, and it'll read it out loud in either English or Spanish. You can copy it if you want to paste it into another document. And then if I wanted to save this phrase, I can star it, and then there's an option to go back to have saved phrases. So I do that a lot with my students. I have them save like their accommodations phrases, like I need help with this, or can you explain this further? So if they just need some quick phrases to get to, this is a great free option for doing that. All right, and then somebody else commented that they like using DeepL, and it's a good alternative to Google Translate. So having options is a good thing, and I think they're both also linked on the Padlet. All right. So I think we're a little bit early with our break. Let's see here. Well, we can break up our break. I guess, what would you like to do, Yvonne?
well, I would like to open it to the chat if you guys have any questions or any comments about it, everything that we've covered so far.
We've had some great feedback for already. I think there's a couple of things that other folks had mentioned that they like using. I think earlier on when we were talking about doing the ethnographic interview and asking more in-depth questions to parents, somebody mentioned using the pragmatics profile, and that has a lot of great questions on there. And they mentioned using that with interpreter. And so I think that's a great option to get more information about our AAC users. And then I also wanted to share with the group, somebody else said that they really like using TD Snap and the visual scenes, and they found that really successful with their multilingual users. And I think those are both great ideas. But yes, are there any other questions or things? All right.
Can I ask a quick question? So
What's that?
when you talk about systems that are designed for a bilingual toggle versus systems that are just translated, when Yvonne, you were talking about the grammar pieces of the language, is that what you mean by a system that is designed for?
No, well, in a way, of course, yes, you wanted to have all of those variations to be able to mark verb tense, gender agreement, to really maintain the structure of the language. But I think what Rui and I meant is that systems that are designed looking at the vocabulary that needs to be present is like when we're thinking of core vocabulary, right? We know that core is heavily influenced by culture. It's not just a specific word like we know in English, we know that eat, more, and go are core in English. Well, in Spanish, those do translate, but if we look at that list, and we'll talk more about Dr. Soto, she did research and published along with Cooper. So Soto and Cooper 2021 is in our references. She came up with a list of words of the early core found in individuals in bilingual English, Spanish speakers, and looking at if there was an overlap between the English core and the Spanish core, and the overlap is surprisingly small. There's not a ton of words that overlap. So when we are taking an AAC device that is meant for English speakers and we're just taking the words and translating them to Spanish, we miss a lot of those early, flexible, early developing words that we see in bilingual AAC users. We don't see them there. And that's what we meant. This device is designed with bilingual AAC users in mind, using that bilingual core, like embedded with that bilingual core understanding of not only the morphosyntax, but also the vocabulary that we want to see present in devices. Did that make sense? Is that clear?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anything you want to add to that, Rui?
I have a question. Thanks for providing this content. This is very helpful. You had mentioned if you are a monolingual SLP and you're providing services to a multilingual student to utilize support personnel, do you mean by then like that, like the parapros who might speak that language? What do you mean by support personnel? And this is specifically for like the schools.
Whoever you got available. So, and so if it's possible to have an interpreter, I know that some schools have, I forget what the title is, but they have, it just depends on like the makeup of your school and who you have available to you. I think for us, we're looking at parapros supporting that. And so training them on what aided language input looks like, collaborating with them throughout the session. Maybe you're providing a bilingual session where you're providing the English input and then the parapro is providing the Spanish input. And so just kind of working with them and collaborating with them. So primarily it's for most schools, it's probably going to be parapros, but if you have other support staff available, which often is not the case, but just kind of like looking at what resources are like exist in your school and utilizing those.
Okay, thank you.
And there was a question Rui saying, should we have words in the exact same places on devices in both languages? And I said, as much as possible, I would say yes, because kids are developing their modal plan and they want to be able to go back and forth and be able to find those words easily and not have to search for them as they're code switching. Yeah. So Brenna asked a question. Core words, are they different in each language? Yes. Yes, they are. There's overlap. And of course, when you're a bilingual, individual, you are going to have that, that, like I mentioned, that intersection between culture and language, where a monolingual Spanish speaker will have slight different experiences than a bilingual Spanish speaker that's being raised in the United States. Yes, Spanish spoken at home, but you still have the influence from the culture where you're being raised, the language that is being spoken, or that's spoken around you. So that's going to impact your core. But that's why we are talking about, you want a device that's being designed, taking into account the, sentence structure of the language, but also the core vocabulary that is relevant to that specific language and culture. Looking at the next.
Yeah, and then I think Krista had a program about or had a question about programming. And so, yeah, so if you're putting a word on one side, you want to make sure that it's in the same location on the other side. So that motor plan is followed as well. So yeah, it's tips on programming. So change the category page to be the same in both languages is another thing, because they can come alphabetically. Yep.
And Krista, yeah, that sounds like designing a whole AAC system. Yeah, that's why we want to go with systems that are kind of already designed with this in mind, because it would take a lot of programming on our part to put this together. Thank you. These are great comments and questions.
Well, I think we got to, let me see here. We got to our break a little bit earlier than anticipated. So I think we're going to wait a little bit longer, if that's all right with the group. So we're going to jump into, so maybe after going over our framework, we can take a break at that point in time, if that works for everyone.
Then there were 2 questions, right?
Okay, so let's go. Oh, so I still understand how to create the system in 2 different languages. So I think we're talking about 2 different things, like picking a system for a bilingual user. And so we want to pick a system that's going to be a best fit. We would not have the onus of creating an entire system. That would be extremely challenging to do. I think what the questions are more pertaining to is how to program words in. So if we have a bilingual system and we wanted to add in like a favorite place that this individual likes to go to, we want to make sure that it's located in the same location on both the English and the Spanish side. So when we're programming and adding things in, we wouldn't really necessarily want to be creating an entire system.
Thank you for clarifying that. And then it says, you can also set the speak setting to use the icons as well, which helps with both languages. Yeah, it's like looking at what Rui mentioned about feature matching. Is this something that's going to help the student? Really, is it going to support not only the user, but communication partners? Although we have to be careful with symbolizing, and that could be a whole other presentation on literacy and supporting literacy. All right, do you want me to get started with framework?
Yes, let me.
Well, all the ones that Rui mentioned before.
Okay.
So we wanted to create a framework for bilingual AAC lesson planning. And what we did is we, instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, we looked at the field of education for lesson plan frameworks, which look at engagement, exploring, practicing, and assessment. And like Roy was saying, the 1 + 1 = 2. We also looked at available resources already created, like Vicki Clark. She has an AAC implementation framework from the DTA schools. And then Bilingual AAC has the cultural linguistic framework. And all of these are linked in the Padlet. So how do we take all of these 3 different elements, culture and language, AAC implementation, and then education, and put it all together to develop a framework that is easy to follow and that encompasses all of those different elements, right? It was fun putting this together. We had to do lots of revisions. So the result was a 3-step framework, including a planning stage, followed by doing and implementing, and ending with the review and the reflection. And in the planning stage, we end up with the creation of visual supports and device navigating and guidance as needed. So we start, in the first part, the planning. We're going to pick all culturally relevant and activity and use inclusive materials. thinking about representation and something that is relevant to them. We're going to select the target words from established sources. Remember, don't translate cord because culture and language are, they come together. And we're going to use technology, leverage technology and artificial intelligence. Select AAC skill to work on thinking about linguistic, social, operational, and strategic competencies. We want to have our Spanish check and make sure it is correct. Sometimes AI hallucinates. And we want to also include supports, visual supports that help with device navigation and having as resources for follow-up and extension activities later on. So the next part of our framework is, how do we do this? How do we implement the lesson plan, right? Are we going to be targeting one language versus two languages? How are we going to share this information with the families through our communication apps that we talked about? Are we going to take pictures, take video? Are we going to push in the classroom to do these supports and then model how to support bilingual AAC users for teachers and other communication partners? And at the end, reviewing what worked and what didn't work, what could we do better?
All right, so where do we start in terms of how to pick Spanish targets, or like what words are we going to be working in Spanish? So where do we look? So like Yvonne was mentioning earlier, our go-to list is by Dr. Gloria Soto and Cooper. And this came out in 2021. And so she went through and compiled a list of words and looking at early childhood development and what words are used, both Spanish and English. And so she identified a list of core words. And so if I go to over here, if I pull up my Padlet, and if you're taking a look through it right now, we're going to go through a lot of resources that are here on our Spanish core list. I'm going to move these up. This is what we're looking at primarily here. So we've attached the article. And then we also have the actual list that Dr. Soto is willing to share with us. So if you click on this, she has it organized and she has it very nicely organized. So we have nouns, verbs, adjectives, prepositions, pronouns, etc. So it's all organized here. It's in both Spanish and English.
Ruth?
Okay, you're not seeing what
Yeah.
Thank you. Let me stop. All right. All right. Are you able to see the list now?
Yes.
All right, great. So I was over here on the Padlet, and on the Padlet we have, if you scroll over to Spanish Core, we've attached Dr. Soto's list, and here it is organized so nicely. So if you're looking for words to target, this is like the best place you can start here. Dr. Soto also took this list and develop the school year of core. So if you're looking for activity ideas, we're going to look through this a little bit more later on as well. But a lot of those words have been utilized when creating these activities here. So this was adapted from the school year of core to make the school year of core bilingual. And it goes through each month. And if I click, for example, if I click on August and I want to do name or nombre, it goes through a number of different contexts or activities in which you can work on the word nombre or name. So they have ideas for snack or mealtime. So they give this suggestion, adults can ask the students what the name of each food is. So, ¿cuál es el nombre de esta fruta? What is the name of this fruit? Or how to use it during circle time. Teachers can use popsicle sticks with every student's name written on them. And this is the way students can learn to identify their own and others' names in written text. So they go through and they have found bilingual books with videos linked here on how to target the word. They go through sensory motor ideas. So it's a really nice resource. I highly recommend taking a look at this if you haven't already. The other great thing about this website is they have a linked Padlet with handouts for parents as well. So if you decided to work on name, let's see if I can find it. Here we have, so it's alphabetical. Here's name. So this is something that you could just print out and share with the parent or send home with the student, and give them some ideas of things that they could work on at home in terms of how to work on the word name. So lots of great things that are already out there. So that's a really great starting point when we're looking for what to target in Spanish. So, and the other thing that Yvonne was mentioning as well is that we don't want to translate core lists. When core lists are created, they look at how frequently they're occurring in each language, language development, what words are developed first. And it's obviously that's going to be different across each language. Other resources of things that we can look at are looking at frequency dictionaries, and there's one linked on the Padlet there. There's the Tell Me program. They have a translated version in Spanish. It is for purchase. But if your school has funds for materials like that, that's a great option. The Practical AAC also came out with a list of words and activities in 2014. So there's going to be some more translating with that list, but a lot of the words are still good words to target. And then if you have users that are using PRC devices, like you can look at Vocabulary Builder as a good option, and PRC's AAC Language Lab has a lot of great word lists and activities in Spanish as well. Another great thing another good idea of things that we can look at are looking at cognates. So how can we build on what language they already know and what they're already exposed to? So we can include some cognates in our list. So this would be considering the cognate advantage. And so the cognates, just a quick review, are words that look and mean the same thing in both languages. So we have chocolate in English and chocolate in Spanish. So those are some words that overlap. Oftentimes our cognate words are going to be very like more of those like tier 2 words in both Spanish and English. And it can, like I mentioned earlier, you're building on what the student already knows about language or what they've been exposed to or what they've heard to further develop their language skills and literacy skills as well. So if just picking some words that are going to be the same across, so that it might not be a high so it's balancing high frequency core, and just what's going to be the best fit for your activity. So we're just giving you some options and things to consider when you're thinking about picking words and what to do.
All right, going a little bit more into the grammar like we talked before. So with verbs, we want to make sure we select what tense we're going to be targeting. We know like the verb ir, which means to go, is going to change depending on how you conjugate it. So it can go from voy, yo voy, I go, vamos, we go, van, you go, vas, you go, but it's the more like ustedes, like formal you. The subject can be part of the verb. So that's when we have that pronoun drop that happens. For example, I eat changes into como, right? We don't have to include the I. We don't have to say yo como. It's already embedded into the verb. And of course, looking at our reflexive verbs, are we adding that reflexive pronoun, me, te, se, or we put it in at the beginning or at the end of the word? Just looking at that. The gender number agreement, again, thinking that, reminding ourselves that it's going to impact both the article and the noun. And the word order, not only the negation, making sure that goes before the action word, but when we use descriptive words or adjectives, they go after the noun. So in English, you would say like the bluebird or the red car. In Spanish, you would put that adjective, that describing word will come after the noun. So el pájaro azul, will be the bluebird, el carro rojo, the red car. So that there's that switching word order. And with questions that the words stay similar to a statement, but with the changing prosody and intonation. So for that case, you will want to teach your student to go to the punctuation and add the question mark. So when the message is spoken out loud, it sounds like a question and it's not just a statement. So with Spanish verbs, like I said before, we're going to have to select if it's a first person or a second person or third person and how it changes. Like I said before, the subject is part of the verb and then reflect the verbs, just more examples of it. like the bear is going to lie down, el oso va a dormir, se. You see how on me gusta comer pizza, the reflexive pronoun happens at the beginning, but on the second example, the reflexive pronoun happens at the end. So how are you going to be showing and teaching that navigation of, going right to left instead of always going left to right with most AAC devices? So it's just things to keep in mind. So not only are we going to be thinking about the grammar, but just looking at the whole thing, like morphosyntax, what is developmentally appropriate. And on the right, there's an image of 4 speech bubbles, and they're labeled as 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and 4 to 5 years old. And each of them gives you and this is from Bilingual Speechy. And it gives you a list of some of the expected morphosyntactic features for each of the ages. And one that I want to point out that is, it's very interesting, especially if you are not bilingual, is that 3-year-olds already have preterite present in their everyday talking. So kids will say like, me caí, fui mamá, when they're forming, 2-word sentences, they're using that past tense early on. So we want to provide them that input. When it's a younger child, we need to take into consideration that they're going to develop it at an earlier age.
So there's a lot of good questions in the chat, and I think it's a good time to pause a little bit and talk about how to pick targets. And so the first question was, is it a priority to model for an early learner the correct subject verb conjugated verbs forms when getting started with AAC? So this person is using Touch Chat Word Power Basic 25 in Spanish, and they're practicing the single word eat. So is it detrimental for the child to only work on comer versus yo como? So that's a really good question. And so I think, so Yvonne, is there anything you do immediately want to answer anything? Otherwise I can.
I'm just looking at Caitlin's answer, and I would go along with that. I think sometimes I would do the same thing. I would provide, especially thinking of a child that is barely starting with that single icon selection, I would focus more on providing that that auditory input with the correct, grammar. But I would look at the operational ability of that student to be able to select and then navigate with icons, and I would just stay with the fastest and easiest. How about you, Rui?
Yeah, I agree. And I think it kind of depends on the system that you're using. So that's going to make a difference too. So if you were using Word Power Basic 25 versus Word Power 60 or LAMP, they're all the navigation and organization is all going to be a little different. So that's going to affect what you're modeling on the device as well. And so I would agree. It just depends how their attention to task. Are you just trying to get them interested in using the device and getting them exposed to it? So if you're going to be wanting to work on those fast hit words, not those that you can get to the quickest. And so, but if you do have a larger vocabulary system and it's the same number of hits to get to comer versus como, I'd probably try to work on that first, as opposed to, because we're not using the infinitive as much in early developing Spanish as we are in maybe in English, because it's the different verb tenses, and so that's going to affect what you're doing as well. And yes, I agree with Kristen. So you want to focus on communication and connection primarily. And so is it a one-hit program versus a sequence program? And so, yeah, if it just again, it depends on their attention. And so in the beginning, if we have our little, especially the little ones, or those that have just shorter attention spans, starting with a one hit is great. And in the beginning, we're not worried about teaching the correct verb forms. And I want to just kind of give some context too. Yvonne and I are just trying to give a little bit of context and background with the Spanish language development and Spanish structure. We're not expecting people to be experts on that when you're providing. We just want you to have a little bit more insight when you are selecting words and what to model, because this comes up all the time. Our first words that we're going to start targeting in English are going to be eat, stop, go. And it's a lot easier to infuse those into sentences that have very context and subjects and etc. But in Spanish, it's a little bit different, because if for example, if I'm looking at LAMP words for life, if I go to the go, it's going to say ir. And so, so should I be modeling ir? Should I be modeling voy? So what should I be modeling? And so that's why we want to give you a little bit of context there. And we agree that connection and motivation and engagement with the device is going to be the number one one priority, making sure that it's something that's motivating to the child. Obviously, we're not going to be doing anything that's compliance-based. We want to make sure that we're including activities that are fun and engaging and things that they like to do. And that's what's most important in formulating a good relationship with AAC, as opposed to like, you know, worrying about like what verb tense that you're working on. Each system is going to be a little bit different. So just figuring out what's going to be the best thing to model on your device. And obviously when you're providing the verbal part of it, you're going to be providing complete sentences. And so they're going to learn how to use it. But those are really good questions and things that that's probably the number one thing that Yvonne and I get asked. All right. Oh, this is a great question. Should we model just Spanish at the beginning, both or English if they only have monolingual people at school? So we're going to talk a little bit more of like when we get into lesson planning here. But I really think it's great to model both. And there's different ways we're going to talk about how to incorporate that into the lessons that you're doing. If you are not a fluent Spanish speaker, you can still support both languages. You can make it a learning opportunity for the both of you. So if you're working on, let's just say you're working on eat, you can say, I don't speak Spanish. Like, let's learn Spanish together. Let's see where it is on the Spanish side. Let's toggle to Spanish. Let's see where we can find eat in Spanish. Let's see what that word is. And you can be still providing them a lot of good language input. You can be learning together. And, you know, if they're capable, maybe they can even find it and show you where the word is. And so I think that there's some good learning opportunities there, but I think it's good to support both or at least having a plan to support both at home. So if you're doing English at school, you know, you can go to that school year of core, maybe find a parent handout on, you know, yes or no. And like, you can send that home and maybe give the parent some ideas of things that they can do at home to support targeting those Spanish words. So, you know, finding a way to support both, whether it's at school or collaborating with the parent, I think are some good options to start with. And they're not going to get confused. If you start with one, and you feel like, you know, it's overwhelming in the beginning, they're not going to get confused. They're going to figure, like, our kids are smart cookies, especially the ones that have very strong visual memories. They are very, very, very smart, and they will pick it up. They're going to learn the context in which to use those words appropriately, or, you know, in the context where it makes sense. And so by exposing them to both languages is not going to cause any kind of confusion or delay in acquisition or delay in use of AAC. But great questions.
Yeah, thank you. You know, we assume that a lot of the things that we are thinking is what everyone is getting out of it. We promise is once we come it all together, we say it all, it'll come together and you'll be able to see all the different parts, but there's a lot of introductions. So on the same lines, we also have to, you know, think of those, not only the linguistic, but also the operational skills, like Rui has mentioned before, that code switching, right? So if you are working on the English side and you're speaking English with your student and you're showing, hey, let's look for this word, you are showing them how to code switch, how to go back and forth, send a handout home and explain about the code switch, and maybe family can work on the Spanish side while you're working on the English side at home. Looking at, you know, are you considering pragmatic and communicative functions that are valued by the family? Is this a family that values answering questions, or is a family that values commenting and engaging in back and forth conversation? Like what are the values of the family and how can we support it? And I have some images here of on this page is some PRC Saltillo products that have that toggle button. You can see it right there on the bottom right that says this, that has the Spanish label, and you click that one and it switches the vocabulary to a different language. On the next slide, I have with Word Powered, and Rui has a handout of this one in the Padlet. But on Word Power, you have to create a button that will toggle between languages. You need to program it. Words for Life, the app, has a toggle button that switches between English and Spanish. Toby Dynavox also has a button that toggles between the two languages, and Proloco with Assisted Word also has one. And this is just some examples. And you can always, you know, create or program a button to act as that toggle between the two. And, you know, and it's a good idea to model them and think ahead of time when you're planning your lesson. Think about what language are you going to be providing support in. That's why we have those creation of those visual supports and other strategies to help you feel comfortable with whatever language you are providing, whatever language input you're providing to the student.
And Caitlin
There's another
commented
question,
in the
Lori.
chat that that she'll ask the child what language they want to use that day. And I think that's a great way of doing it.
Good question.
All right, so Yvonne and I have been kind of going through some foundations, different tools and things to look at. So we're slowly putting this together in our framework, and eventually we're going to get to some different lesson planning. But before we get there, we wanted to go over how to combine what we know about AAC core, AAC bilingual core, and utilizing technology and tools. And so one of the things that Yvonne and I have come across is using AI to come up with word lists and also different utterances that we can model throughout our language sessions. And so using one of our chatbots, we put together this prompt here. So it says, using Dr. Soto's word list of early Spanish vocabulary for children who use AAC, and taking into consideration developmental and linguistic factors, create a list of, and then you can insert whatever number you want, of culturally relevant sentences for a Hispanic student. And you can describe the student's language stage using their MLU or other descriptor. And we want to omit subject pronouns when context allows, and include this English translation. And so you can also add on the setting or location that you're working on these sentences. You can add on if you want to target specific pragmatic or communicative functions. If you're utilizing a type of book or theme in your session, you can include that, specific parts of speech, or whatever the theme is that you're working on. So this is our sample prompt that we're going to be using throughout our sessions, throughout our lesson plans. We're going to go over a little bit here. But we did want to mention, like, anytime we're using AI, that we're going to be using this to develop our therapy materials, and that obviously we want to be responsible and use AI with caution, and we're never going to enter in any of our students' PHI or identifying information. And just some things to be aware of too, like we all know that AI is not perfect, and that we're going to have to proofread for grammar and translation accuracy. And that also, if we're using image generators and we're including those into our therapy, that some drawbacks are going to be that they're not always going to include cultural diversity, and you're going to have to be more explicit with your prompts if that's something that you're using. So I think the next thing we're going to go over is visual and vocabulary tools. But I think before we do that, we're going to take our break here. And so I'm going to go ahead and put up a timer. So we have a 15-minute break. And let me go down here. And so I'm just going to put this up on the screen, and everyone can take a break, get a stretch.
But that brings bad memories from waking up.
All right, so let's turn this on. But before we get back to our presentation, I think that there was a couple of questions in the chat. So somebody asked, are we going to have access to the Padlet indefinitely? Yes. It may change over time as what we learn, and when we know better, we're going to be doing better. So the resources might change. So if there's something you really like in there, I'd recommend downloading it. But we don't plan to delete access or delete the Padlet by any means. So it's there for you to use. There's just so much to know. So that's why we like to have that there for folks. And then somebody else had a question that they wanted to unmute to ask. So feel free, Carrie. Or maybe we will come back later. Any other questions before we continue with the presentation?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Trish, can you mute for a second? Sorry, I have somebody else in my office also listening. So I have a question about when assessing a student to get an AAC device. Of course, if the child is non-speaking, that's a no-brainer to get them an AAC device. But I often get, and I'm one of the assistive technology coordinators for our district. I'm also an SLP, and I'm a monolingual English speaker. So this is kind of my background. So I often get requests from other SLPs for kiddos who have this profile. They're monolingual Spanish speaking. They're usually coming in from preschool. They've had an assessment by a bilingual SLP who has noted that they have delays in articulation and language. So we know that they're delayed in their language development, but not necessarily non-speaking. They get into preschool where they're English speaking, and then they'll have an English speaking SLP. And then the kiddo isn't talking. And so then I get a request for possible AAC. And I absolutely believe no prerequisites for AAC, but I hesitate because I know about the, silent period where they're receptively kind of just listening and developing that English language. And so what would your recommendation be? Like, do we just put it, like, is there no harm? And so just put an AAC device with them? Could they benefit from the visuals from the AAC? Or would you wait a period of time to see if they start developing? Like, yeah, I'm just not feeling confident in that.
Can I jump in, Rory? I'm actually in our district. We're doing right now another co-SLP and I were doing coaching for the district and provided professional development for the preschool program. And part of our training has been using, visual supports, and what better visual support than AAC to support multilingual communicators that are not developing language as fast as we would like them to develop language. And we know from the research and from our practices that AAC does not harm anyone, and it can help everyone, and is needed by some. So I would not hesitate to provide AAC to these students. Worst case scenario, they don't need it down the line. Best case scenario, they had it in front of them where they needed it, and it'll allow them to have that dual language exposure, because like you said, the SLP will be able to use that AAC program as a support to scaffold the dual language support. So it's I don't know, in my mind, it just seems like a win-win situation, just having that available. What do you think, Rory?
That's so helpful. Thank you so much.
No, I agree. I think that, it's the same concepts that we know with AAC in general, and that if AAC is available, if they don't have other means to communicate, and if we know also that they're going to want to be as efficient as possible. So once they develop if they develop those like verbal oral skills, and it's not something they need anymore, then they don't have to use it. But I think especially during this period of transition, it's something helpful to have. You can also just be utilizing core boards and like more visuals throughout the classroom. I think looking at all the modalities and having it in Spanish and English is really helpful. So I just, I don't think there's any harm in providing that additional support. All right. That's a great question though. And so keep them coming. Like, that's what Yvonne and I are here for, and that's what we enjoy doing. These are great questions, and we're both school clinicians. We're both here for the meat of the topic. And so if there's burning questions that you want to ask, like, by all means, feel free to put them in a chat or ask them out loud. All right, so let's jump back in here. All right, so the next thing that we want to look at when we're thinking about our bilingual framework is looking at our AAC navigation tools. And so most of the apps and devices are going to have some kind of search feature where you can figure out where those words are located that you're working on. So now that you have your word list, hopefully from Dr. Soto or from other sources, you can also use Word Finder to figure out how to navigate to the words that you're working on. And then if you have a device that has some kind of hide show feature, that's something that you can utilize as well to help facilitate targeting those words in therapy. We can also come up with other visual supports for AAC navigation. So like PRC, Saltillo, they have the smart charts, or in Chat Editor for Saltillo, they have, I'm blanking on what it's called, but very similar to smart charts, where you can develop the navigation sequence to get to those target words. Toby Dynavox has I am blanking on all the things today. I think they're called smart cards. And then, so just looking at what other supports that you have for whatever apps that you're working on. You can also work on exploring the device yourself, like just like practicing and remembering where those words are. And you can make your own tutorials or videos if you want, if you think that's helpful, but just figuring out that navigation piece before you get started is going to be a good thing. So we just have some visuals here on how to use like the PRC Saltillo products. So with Unity and Unidad and LAMP, you can use the Pasa software to develop those smart charts. And so that's linked on our Padlet here. We have the icons for that and where those are located. For Saltillo and TouchChat, you can utilize Chat Editor to create your smart charts like I mentioned earlier. And those are linked. There's a YouTube video on how to do that. And then Tobii Dynavox, you can print the layout of the vocabulary system within the program there. And so those are some of the visuals that we want to be using. So you want to have those ready to go before your lesson, if possible, or at least played around with the device a little bit to figure out where those words are, or at least how to use Word Finder or the search feature. And then the next thing we want to think about is materials. You're muted.
Thank you. We always want to think about, our materials, and are we providing inclusive materials, that are where our students are seeing themselves represented. There's lots of resources out there. Check out your local library. Bilingual AAC has a great list. There's also some book lists available on Habla DLL. In our Padlet, we included a number of word lists. I know Scholastic YouTube channel has them too. There's the website Colorín Colorado, also in our Padlet, has a lengthy list divided by level, like preschooler, elementary age, middle school, and high school. And I actually think I saw one on Amazon. There's a Amazon culturally diverse reading materials list out there. So it's just, if you Google, you'll find lots of resources out there. So what is the plan? Like when we go to the next step on our implementation, like you asked, all of you guys asked before, you're like asking the questions before we get to it. So I love it that you're thinking ahead. Will you be targeting English or Spanish during your session? If you're targeting English, who's going to be providing that Spanish support? Is it going to be provided by you or by a different person? Is it in the community? Is it at home? Are the chosen activities culturally relevant and connected to self, community, and family? Oh, thank you. Oh, let's add that one. First books. Okay. We'll add it to the Padlet. I always think of whenever I see all of those products that talk about winter and snow out there, those things circulated on TPT, and how not relevant they are to our Tucson community, where we rarely see any snow. It's like, whoa, the kids are not going to get that. They're not going to be very connected to that topic. And who will be providing that Spanish support? As always, advocating for access to interpreters on a regular basis to develop materials. And of course, we are looking at, the ideal scenarios, although we know that resources are limited in the schools and everywhere you go, but just advocating for that extra piece. We talked about, Rui and I talked about this before, that we are co-constructing communication, right? It's an experience that is being built between us and the AAC users. So student and client teaches you about their culture and experience, and is this multi-directional learning and teaching happening. You're able to teach the AAC user the language to meet their individual needs, while we're also learning about their language and their culture. Like Rui mentioned, this is a good place for you to start also practicing learning your language. And it's okay for them to see a struggle. I think is actually very beneficial. I make a point of really highlighting when I make a mistake, when I pick the wrong picture, and just be like, oops, I did not mean to do that one. And it's like a communication repair strategy, talking about that core competencies. That's an operational skill. How do you repair a communication breakdown? How do you let the other communication partner know that you made a mistake, and how do you fix that? And if you ever had one of those students that are they're very cautious about formulating or touching the device, touching icons on the device, they're just they're just not eager to try and make mistakes. So showing them it's okay to struggle, showing them it's okay, and And developing the trust and rapport, like someone mentioned before, that engagement and connection is going to be key for buy-in and for long-term use of the AAC. So here it comes, lesson 1. Let's go to it. So the lesson plan we picked was we wanted to pick a culturally relevant activity and then the target words. We look at the AAC user profile. In this case, is an emergent communicator. Early symbolic language is using one icon to communicate. The theme selected is playground because we know play is a universal theme considered that crosses over culture and language. We want to select our target, and for that we go back to our questionnaires, our results on linguistic level, what is important and relevant to this family and to this community, and choose an activity and related core and fringe vocabulary. And I always try to aim for that 80-20 balance where you have 80% core and 20% fringe as much as you can. And of course, embedding that key vocabulary that is important to that individual student. Some ideas that I had for core was targeting stop and go, fast and slow, up and down, and I try to target opposites together just for the ease of learning those concepts. But something to note here is that in Spanish, the word go implies moving, as in changing locations. So for that reason, I actually went with run instead of go. And for fringe, I just had slide and swing. So what I did is you can look at, the different tools that we have using AI chatbots, Google or Word documents, and then Dr. Soto's list is another place to look, and then check for errors. Just make sure that whatever you have, whatever sets of words and phrases that you have set up, just, run them through a different translating site. Ask a Spanish speaker to take a peek and see, does this make sense? Is it something relevant to the community where you live? Like Rui mentioned before, Tucson Spanish is very different from New York Spanish and from Washington Spanish. The community is going to impact the kind of words and the phrases that are used. So just leverage those people in your community in AI tools. Rui, do we want to play the video for the next one? Okay. I'll take my word list and insert it into a table, a 2-column table, 1 column for English, 1 for Spanish, paste them in there. And then on another side of the screen, I will have Dr. Soto's Spanish-English overlap of core vocabulary, and then use the find feature. So I'll type in English, the word stop, find next. There you go. Pararse, to stand, to stop. That sounds about right. I can click it, control copy, and paste in the Spanish side. So you don't have to even worry about the spelling. Just copy and paste. So go. There you go. Irse, to go. Ir, irse. And I'll include both. And then we have fast. Did not make the list. It's not considered Spanish core. Slow. Same thing. Up. Arriba. Down. Abajo. Here. This one. Ooh. This is there. But I also have there down here, so I can select and place it under there and keep looking. Find next. Here, aquí. That's the one. And there you go. You have the translation. So now you just need to look for fast and slow, and you can use those free websites, Google Translate or Word document translate options to get that translation. So I just wanted to show you how I'll take my, how fast that went. I mean, it took almost no time at all. because it's one thing for me to tell you, it doesn't take a long time for you to see it in action. So in this case, you notice that I used the word go, but when it came to actually implementing it, I switched it over to run. So we want to look at those words that are not part of the Spanish core and decide if they are relevant to the activity and whether they should be taught at this time or not. I decided they were pretty relevant to the activity. And of course, use native speakers, community members, and reverse translations to check for that accuracy. And all of that together, oh wait, hold on, there's a question in the chat. Okay, sorry. We can talk about it later. All right. So on the next slide, Rui, there you go. So this is what put on the table. I put the words, I placed them in here with the phrases, to go along with it. And then with the translation, so I would know what I was modeling. So in these cases now I know, okay, I know what I'm going to be targeting. I know what phrases I'm going to be targeting, and I can start thinking about, am I meeting communication functions? Am I providing enough variety? Am I modeling one level up from where the student is language-wise? And I can continue on my planning of my lesson. But I had questions. What would happen if I had, instead of going into Dr. Soto's list, what if I had tried using AI? Would I come with a similar response? Can you go to the next one? So this is the prompt I used, and the highlighted the pieces that are bolded is what changes from the original prompt. I asked for 6 words, MOU of 1, theme is playground, and the functions that I included was requesting, commenting, and cessation. So what AI responded was the following, and AI is not perfect. I took that and then I ran it through Google Translate to make sure it was grammatically correct. And the third phrase, rápido pelota, was not. So it should be pelota rápida because pelota is female. And so rápido should be rápida. And because we know that the adjectives come after the noun, so I switched it to pelota rápida. But then I thought, fastball, we don't really use fastball, that phrasing in Spanish. So if you're looking at cultural relevance, not much of that. But I also like how it was divided into the different communicative functions: requesting, commenting, and cessation. So for the next part of my lesson planning, like you saw me before, I was identifying the verb tense. What are the functions, the communication that I'm targeting? Am I going to be looking at those operational competencies of AAC? Are we going to be working on code switching? Do I want to target turn taking, communication breakdown repair strategies? And what is the target language that's going to be used during the session? Or if I'm using both, how am I going to support that second language? So I put the results from the AI on a list too and see, okay, if I can have my 2 lists and then make my selection. So I have on my first column, I have my core word in English and in Spanish. The next column is the phrase in English. And then on my third column, I have the translated phrase along with the function that I'm going to be targeting. So for more swing, más columpio, or tobogán for the slide. I have a request where I can ask by asking, including that question mark. Quiero tobogán. ¿Quieres tobogán? Do you want a slide? Of course, we want to have that assent and negation. So we have no more, no más, no quiero, like all done. It's important for them to be able to tell us that. And of course, I included fast, which I could also include slow, and up, and I could also include down for that. But just showing how either using Dr. Soto's score list or using AI and just being mindful of what is your overall plan for the lesson, what are some of the functions that you want to target, and make sure that you plan ahead and have those ideas already written down in front of you. So the next piece is practice finding those target words in both Spanish and English before the lesson, so you know where they are. Someone said something about how do we go back to the English and the Spanish side. So practicing ahead of time, knowing where those words are, and if possible, creating those visual supports that Rui mentioned. That's going to give us the support for those icon sequences to navigate to target words, but also they'll be useful when we are done with our lessons and we look at how are we implementing this and how we extending the activity to continue the supports outside of the therapy room or just the pushing session that we have with our students. On the next slide, we have the visual supports that I created with, on the first column, there are the target words, stop, run, fast, slow, and up. On the middle column are the phrases that I selected. I just copied them from the previous table. And on the third column, I have the icon sequences that shows you how to find the specific target words I want. And I've seen in the past, my students will peek at my visual supports and try to model them and try to find them themselves. So it just serves both purposes. And these are great to have. And because they're in both English and Spanish, you can print them, make 2 copies, send one home in their backpacks. You can upload one to the messaging system that you decide to use, either paste it on their notebooks or take a picture and upload it to Class Dojo or Remind or whatever messaging system you use, and then leave one in the classroom for teachers and parapros to continue to support the strategies that you were modeling. So like I said before, with the extension of the activity, we can, share the English and Spanish visual supports as a resource for staff and the family. We can, like I said, embed in a classroom newsletter, like using Smore or Canva with ideas for parents to continue practicing. Share the news stories through communication apps. I also like to take videos, like short videos, and then send them to parents, or sometimes take pictures of our sessions and just send them to parents too for sharing. Just make sure that you have your parent permissions signed so you can have that back and forth video or photo for media release. So now that we have our plan and we are thinking of the extension, another thing that we have to be mindful of is thinking of those authentic writing opportunities. We know that the ultimate AAC is going to be for students to develop literacy. So we can use those predictive charts where we still continue with the same thing, but give our students opportunity to translanguage in the classroom setting. Can they say, I play? Can they say juego? And then use whatever word they have on their system in whatever language they want to showcase that and to, just leverage all their abilities in both languages. Offering manual boards matching the class AAC system with target words circle. I also like to use wiki sticks to put around the icons that I'm targeting when you take them out on the school playground, because I know in some schools, they are not very comfortable taking the devices outside. So, okay, let's bring those manual boards, those printed core boards. And of course, translanguaging UDL considerations, have those bilingual core boards available, have that bilingual French vocabulary paired with pictures and symbols and or photos around the classroom, use pre-recorded single voice output buttons in both languages, all of those different extension activities to support that dual language opportunities. And the next step, of course, is going to be our doing a review. How do we implement this in the lesson plan? Modeling. We cannot say it enough. Having fun, like Rowan mentioned, is don't hide your struggle and enjoy this. This is supposed to be a fun, connecting activity that's going to encourage your student to use whatever language they have at the disposal and communicate. And if possible, like I said before, share with the family. And at the end of it, review what worked, what didn't work. It's been my experience that most of my students, even though I'm modeling Spanish, all of their replies are in English, and that's okay. Sometimes the comfort is not there. They're not ready to show us what they know in Spanish. And sometimes they start showing the Spanish at home because they know school is English and home is Spanish. So even though we're providing that Spanish input, they're not going to show it to us. They'll show it to their families.
Sharon had a question. So she said, if I do the activity partly in Spanish and partly in English, is that okay? Or do I do it once in English and once in Spanish? So I think that's a really good question. For me personally, I think what works easiest for me is just doing a bilingual session. So you can be modeling your words in English and then in Spanish or vice versa. Or you could do like part of your session in English and part of your session in Spanish. Or, you know, if you're not comfortable with that, then utilizing like some of those parent handouts from the school year of core bilingual Padlet and sending those home. So I think whatever you're comfortable with and you feel like is most gonna be most natural for your session. And so I like the comment from earlier, like I think our first priority is, you know, communication and connection. And then the second priority is, you know, in working on these specific language skills.
Agree 100%. Absolutely. Yeah. So I wanted to show you an example of one of my sessions. And so just background on my student, he is context dependent. He's at a context dependent level with an MLU of about 3.5. He's a second grader. He loves natural disasters. That's his thing, especially tornadoes and hurricanes. The language inventory revealed that he has mixed Spanish and English input at home, but also at school. I work at a site where you are walking down the hallway and then you hear Spanglish left and right. So there's just a lot of dual language happening everywhere. So as an SLP, I told him I was going to only use English during our session, which felt kind of different, but I wanted to showcase that it could be done this way too. So I gave him a warning that I was not going to speak Spanish to him, but then I use speech to text, AI. I actually use Google Translate on my phone for that Spanish input, and his speech generating device was set up with a toggle button to switch between English and Spanish. I typically have my own device where I model too, so I'll have my device set up to Spanish, and then I'll model back and forth. But in this case, we were using my iPad to film the session, so I did not have a device in front of me. You also see that in front of me, I have a printed visual support with the phrases I want to target and with the navigation guidance to find those words. And what you'll see is take number 2, because the first time that we did this, I was not recording. I forgot to press the record button. I don't know if this ever happened to you, but it happened to me. So I apologized and I said, dude, we're going to have to do it again. Just bear with me. Let's do this. Okay, you have a question here.
Let's go ahead and show that video and then we can come back to some questions.
Going downstairs. Abajo. You are looking for something.
Buscando algo.
You're looking for something.
Buscando algo.
Oh. That?
Eso.
Let me see if I can help you look for that. Like a basement? Oh, right there. There it is.
Basement.
Basement. All right. So we're going to go back a little bit. I know. Because I forgot I wasn't filming. Okay. How about this one? So tell me again about that one. Remember how we were talking about that picture?
¿Qué es eso?
What is that one? Tornadoes can form with...
Thunder.
Uh-huh. With thunder and what else?
Más.
What else is thunder? I know. Can I help you look for it? So they can form with, is it wind or lightning or storm?
Wind.
With wind? You definitely need wind. Wind and what else? I see that dark over there.
Oscuridad.
Yeah, dark right there. You know what that means? When you see dark?
Oscuridad. Eso.
That one? That usually means rain. So you need to have rain and wind for a tornado to form. You know that already. Yeah. Okay, go to the next one. Now, what do we need to say about that? There are no tornadoes in Arizona. Yay! I know. We are safe. Oh, tell me about that. Tell me about those winds. You told me before, but I wasn't filming. Okay, can you tell me about that? Tell me about the winds. Winds are
Muy asustado. Strong.
yes, they're strong.
Fuerte.
Uh-huh.
Soplando. Fuerte.
Well, you can see a tornado. Uh-huh. You can see a tornado, and if you see the tornado,
Corre rápido.
I know.
Corre rápido.
Whoa!
Oh no, come back.
You ran so fast. That was so fast.
Vuelve. Vuelve.
Come on, come back. Okay, so if you see your tornado, you have to run fast.
Corre rápido.
I know. And then what else? Can I show you here? You can run
Run.
fast.
Fast. Run fast.
Run fast, right? I know. What else? What's the next one? What else can we do? And you can stay safe by going.
Oh. I see you're hiding under the table.
Hide in the bathroom? Huh. Hide under. You're going under the table. Under the table. Come here. Oh. Can you put it in here? See if you have the word. Ready?
Esconderse debajo de la mesa.
Is that what you need to do if there's a tornado?
Esconderse debajo de la mesa.
I think she's going in her house. She's going to a special place. Maybe here in their home.
Basement.
Yeah, she's hiding in the basement. Where would you hide? Yes, I know he's pointing to under the table. I'm trying to type as fast as I can.
¿Dónde te esconderías?
Oh, you went under the table. Yes, you would go under. We can find those under a bridge. Or you can say under.
Under.
Under the table.
Esconderse debajo de la mesa.
Yep. Hide under the table. So there it is, a very messy but fun session. And this kid, usually what we do afterwards is we do start doing some drawing. He asked if I continued recording, you would see him asking for drawing paper. And then he draws about what we talked about. And then we talking bubbles and thinking bubbles to start adding authentic writing to his comic strips. And, you know, we use both English and Spanish. Sometimes he writes hola, sometimes he writes hi. So there's lots of things that you can embed into it.
So before we go on to the second lesson plan, there was a question about choosing which language to target. And so there, especially when we're working with younger Spanish dominant individuals. And so the question was, there's a new preschool student who's not yet speaking and comes from a Spanish speaking home where only Spanish is spoken. So is it okay to stay in Spanish on the device at the beginning until the student starts using some words? And so Yvonne, you've been working more with preschool lately. Do you want to respond to that question?
I would look at their engagement for an answer. I mean, at first, of course, I want to, give them access to those words in Spanish, but I would do, toggle between languages and see if the interest and the engagement continues when you model English. And if they're okay with that, then I would, go back and forth. Like you said, they're hearing that English in the classroom already, like orally, they're hearing that, they're getting that input. But I would leave it up to the student to see if they engage as well with the device, if it's in both languages or if it's just in Spanish. What do you think, Rui?
No, I think I agree. And I think I'd really just provide access to both and model in both. And I agree with you and see what they respond to. Because I think also seeing what their peers are doing is highly motivating. And so they might, gear more towards English in the classroom, but I think their comprehension is probably going to be stronger in Spanish. And so giving them access to both is probably the most helpful thing. All right, so we're going to go on to a second example of a lesson plan that you could do with a bilingual AAC user. And for this one, our profile for the users that they're an emergent communicator, and now we are working on 2-word utterances, but they can range from 1 to 3. And to make it fun, we're going to work on cooking and making quesadillas. And when we're looking at our selection list for target words for the session, we're going to look at Dr. Soto's list. We're going to consider any cognates and looking at that core and fringe balance as well. So work smarter, not harder. We're going to utilize our technology and AI. And so we've adjusted our prompt we want 24 culturally relevant sentences of an MLU of 3. We put in our theme, which is making quesadillas, and we want to work on, we put in some different functions, but we're going to select which one we want to work on. So we put that prompt into AI, and this is what it gave us. It gave us a nice list of different requests, comments, and like Yvonne said, we instructed it to do both English and Spanish. So if we want to target both and go back and forth throughout the session, we can definitely do that. If we want to do part of the session, if we want to work on some requests in Spanish and then some in English, we have both there to do that. So we have some good comments here. And we also have some working on cessation or ending that task. So no more cheese, ya, stop, suficiente or enough, no quiero más, I don't want more. Another way that we could adjust our prompt is to focus on 2 specific words. So if I know for my session, I only want to work on put and like, I can adjust it to reflect that. So I want 12 sentences with the word put and 12 sentences with the word like. And so this is what it gave to me. So it was instructing a person on how to make a quesadilla. And so this is what it gave for pon or ponga or put. And so I would take that word list and what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste it into a Google document. I can run the spell check to make sure that there's for any grammatical errors. And like Yvonne said, it's never going to be perfect. For example, let me see here. If I go back to my list, one of the words it says pon la sartén. And so in Spain, Spanish, la sartén is correct, but in Tucson, we're going to say el sartén. So it's never going to be perfect, but it's giving us a pretty good head start on giving us some sentences. So there are going to be your occasional errors and whatnot. And if you don't speak Spanish, you're not going to always pick up on everything. But I think the whole point with these lesson plans that we want to emphasize is that obviously this cannot replace a bilingual provider. But what we're doing is we are letting them know that we want to support their home language. If they would prefer to use that, they certainly can throughout their sessions. And by hearing it and by learning how to navigate the device to find those words, I think that's going to outweigh like some occasional grammatical errors. And so at the end of the day, our main message is we're supporting both languages so that way their overall language skills can grow. So I have my responses from AI. And so we want to continue to leverage technology. And so one of the cool tools we might use is Natural Reader. And so what I'm going to take is my word list that I got from AI. I'm just going to throw it into a Google Doc. And then if I want to utilize it during a session, I'm just going to give an example of how I might use Natural Reader to do that. So I'm going to play this video. Use Natural Reader. I'm going to go ahead and open up Google Chrome. I already have Natural Reader installed as an extension up here at the top, and I have it pinned as well. And I'm going to go ahead and click that icon to open it up. Here I'm going to have some settings here at the top, some things I'm going to want to make sure that I've looked at ahead of time. The first thing is the voice. So I'm going to go ahead and change that here. I can go ahead into Spanish US and select something that I think is going to work. And then I can adjust the speed as well. So if I want to slow it down a little bit, if I feel like it's moving too fast, that's definitely an option. The other thing I want to check out if I'm using this for the first time are the settings, especially the hotkeys. One thing I had difficulty with in the beginning was figuring out how to navigate the reader. And so I can use my arrow buttons, my arrow up and down keys if I want to go back or go forward. And then I can pause it here. Once I play the natural reader, additional settings are also going to appear, including closed captionings. Unfortunately, it doesn't open it up right now, but I'm going to click that one after I hit play. So that way at the bottom, and a screen will pop up here with large text and closed captions to help read along. So I'm going to go ahead and close this, and we're going to go ahead and read this.
Como hacer una quesadilla. Pon la tortilla. Pon queso. Pon la sartén. Pon la estufa. Pon el plato. 1. Pon la tortilla. Put the tortilla. 2. Pon queso. Put cheese. 3. Pon la.
So you'll notice that the voice will switch back and forth between English and Spanish, and it automatically picks up what language it is. And then if I want to be skipping around, I can also use my up and down arrows. All right, so that's natural reader, and that's just another way where you might be able to provide input. So you could have that up. You could, have some of those sentences read and maybe making a quesadilla together, or you could take some pictures and go back through and describe the pictures of like the different steps of making a quesadilla. So those are some ways that you can leverage technology. All right. So we have, we picked our target words. We have put and like, or pon and me gusta. We have some different functions. So we could work on requesting, commenting, and ending. And I definitely would want to be working on code switching throughout, or at least like exposure to both Spanish and English. And so what I was going to focus on during this activity is by the end, I would want the student to give instructions on how to make a quesadilla. And then I would want to make sure ahead of time that I would just memorize how to navigate to those target words, and or at least how to use the search feature or word finder on how to do that, or maybe I use hide show. So that way it's easy to work on those words throughout the session. And then I'd practice toggling between Spanish and English throughout. In an extension activity for that, we could actually write out a recipe using speech to text with their AAC device. We could also work on some writing by using predictable chart writing. We have some phrases here, like I like a lot of cheese on my quesadilla, I like a little cheese on my quesadilla. And like we've talked about before, taking pictures to share with the family, either to incorporate in your therapy session to talk about describing events, but also you could use those to share with the family as well. And then you could utilize that shared news feature if you have that in your AAC device, where you could record what you did that day, or you could send home a message through one of those communication apps like Class Dojo. So, this is our plan, like we planned ahead, we prepped, we looked through all of our resources, we put together some, like a good lesson plan to utilize. So we're going to put that in action. We're going to model like Yvonne was talking about, our modela. We always want to have fun, and just, doing our best to learn from our students, letting, the more messy the better. If they see us struggle a little bit, just, it's always a good reminder. It's helpful because it makes us slow down when we're modeling on devices. It helps students, leverage what they know about their home language and teach us Spanish if possible. And then just always reflecting what worked with that lesson, what didn't work, and adapting as you go. So, something else that we really want to highlight too is that this is a lot of work. We fully recognize how much work this is, and by no means do we think it's practical for people to be creating lessons plans like this for every single group that they're working on for every single week. But we're just trying to highlight some examples of different tools and things that you can do. Other things that we've seen SLPs do in districts is that you can come together, you can have sharing like different lesson plans, like maybe if there's a few other SLPs or therapists that you're working with, and you all compile like different lesson plans, so that way, and you can have like things that you can choose from, activity ideas with already pre-formulated phrases that you can be working on. So we're all about like working smarter, not harder. And we're just highlighting different tools that you can utilize to support that home language. And so, but we do recognize how much work it could be to put something like this together. And we recognize that this is not going to be a daily occurrence, but we just wanted to give you some options of things like what it could look like at least. All right, so now we're going to move on to our third lesson plan that we're going to work on together. And so let's see. All right, Yvonne, you want to take over?
Sure. And for this one, if you guys want to unmute yourself and participate orally or just type in the chat, whatever you want to do, feel free to do so. This is supposed to be an interactive activity. We would love to hear, about what is working for you and what is not working. So the user profile is going to be a stage 2 emergent communicator that is combining 2 to 3 word icons. And the plan is to adapt a pre-made lesson for an emergent AAC user. So that is our plan. So we're going to look at a resource that already exists. Like I said, the School Year of Core Bilingual, it's a great resource. And we're going to be adapting, they already have the Spanish adaptations, and we're going to utilize the Soto corporate list for that. So if you guys can have it open, this is the one we chose. We looked at February. One of the words was, I think it was quién, right? Like the question, who? So we went for a reading book activity and chose the story, ¿Quién tomó las galletas? Rui, do you want to share your screen and show them how to find the transcripts on YouTube, since you're sharing the screen?
Sure.
Okay.
So
Ahora más es
on the School Year of Core website, they had this video already linked. So this is one of the reading activities that you could do together. And then I'm gonna,
if you go on the left side where it says more, left. Now down, should be 1.3 and more. Yeah, you're right there. Just click on where it says more. I'm sorry, Rui. I put you on the spot. So on the, where it says 1.3K views 2 years ago, that paragraph on the website, and then you click more.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yes, and it's at the bottom. Sorry.
All right. So what Yvonne just wanted to share was how we can, so this is a book so the book is ¿Quién tomó las galletas del tarro de galletas? So who took the cookies from the cookie jar? So it's a bilingual book. It's in Spanish and English. And so one of the cool features on YouTube is that you can scroll down and you can show the transcript.
Let's show me this.
All right, so the transcript is here. And then is there anything else you wanted me to show, Yvonne?
Yeah, so if you want to get rid of the toggle, so if you click on the 3 buttons, the 3 dots that you clicked before, and you do toggle, you can get rid of the timestamps. If you copy and paste that, you'll get a transcript of the entire book, and you can use that for a number of different things. If you're looking for which are the words that are used more frequently in the story, what is the theme of the story? Can you give me a summary of the story? You can pop this transcript and throw it into any of those AI tools, ChatGPT, Gemini, can't think of the other one right now, Copilot, Microsoft Copilot. Throw it in there and just throw a prompt of, give me a summary, 20 words of length of this story. Boom, you have the summary of the story, you know what you're talking about. Or tell me which ones are the 10 most frequently occurring words, ignore single letters, I'm sorry. And it'll give you which ones are the words that appear more frequently in the story. So if you think of those books that are repetitive, and it'll give you an idea, and it's already translated to Spanish. So think about, you're going to be reading the story, and then you already have this plan that took you 5 minutes to gather the transcript, throw it into the AI tool, and then take from that a summary, and then maybe some ideas of words that you can target, or even phrases. You can even ask it, give me some, what are some recurrent phrases that come in this story? What are some questions that you would ask me about this story? And use those as part of your therapy, designing your therapy. Thank you, Rui. So for this one, in this case, we're gonna practice finding quién and who, and use the device icons through the website or the computer emulator program just to create our visual supports. And if you have the ability to hide and show certain words, also have that set up, and keep those English and Spanish words on our visual supports as a resource for staff and family. Can you guys think of anything else that you would want to do as an extension? You guys feel free to put it in the chat. What would be a fun extension to do with an activity like this? Or what do you think would be some fun phrases to try? Maybe we can get have Dr. Soto's list up, and then you guys can look at that, or you can look it up in the Padlet. See if you can come up with some fun phrases to try. This might be hard to read on the screen, so if you guys can pull it up on your own. The ones that I've used is, there's a question. When you all are generating those sentences in both languages with all the parameters, are you using Brace Teaching AI extension or ChatGPT, or what are you using? I go back and forth. I've tried them on Microsoft Copilot. I've tried Gemini AI. I've tried ChatGPT. I have not used Brisk. I don't have that extension on my computer. But I would try a number of different ones and see if you can find a common theme. You are not going to get the same response for every AI because they have, different parameters, but I use all three of them. I go back and forth between them. Okay, so we have hidden parts of a person's face in the building to work on who. Then practice the name of school staff with the question who. Oh, that's great. That's like, yeah. So what would be some phrases? Think of in English. Go ahead. Tell us some phrases in English that you could use to practice who. Rui, can you go back to the description of the student's language level? So he's combining 2 to 3 word icons. He's at a stage 2 and he's an emergent communicator. So think about some phrases in English that you would want to model for the student in the context of this activity. And one of the target words is going to be who. Who's at school today? Who is here? So this can go on your list. I know who, So think of functions. Do you want to add some commenting, some question formulation, some negation? Who is it? Who knows? Who faced? Not sure about. Yeah, no, that's good. Who is that? So this kid is combining 2 to 3 words. Who is home? So I hear a lot of questions. Think about statement. Kind of hard because who is a question. Yeah. But maybe something that would lead to that. I look in office. Yeah. What would be a good negation? Who's not here? Love it. So you guys are giving me great examples. I would take those, not a child, not a mom. I would take those, copy them, and paste them into one of the translating tools that we showcase, and you'll have your phrases. And then just make sure, do I have a variety of functions that I'm targeting? Cookie's not here. Who likes it? Who does not like it? I know there's so many choices. So this is how you do it. I mean, just simple like that. Keep it simple. Take those phrases, plan them, what you want to say in English, you already have your activity. And I know in this website with the bilingual school year of core, they have phrases, they have recommendations throughout. So for the word who, if you look at the different ones, Rui, can you bring it up? The one on the Padlet for bilinguals, yeah. So you'll see, I'll give you some more phrases that you can target in there. I don't know if I can read.
So we have under play, we have who is who. So there's a guessing game that they've linked here. Where you can download like who has, who lives, who. And then they also have let's see, some structured activities. Like another who has game, beginning sounds. That's free on TPT. And then ideas of using apps or other technology. They have PBS Kids has a game. Who wants to play? So they could model, oh, who wants to play the game? Who's next? Who's
And
hiding?
the phrases are already translated, yeah.
Creating a word wall and adding quién or who to the list. Have the students find the word on the AAC system. Practice writing the word. During snack and meal times, talking about who brought what. So who wants what, who wants apples, who finished their food. So there's some other examples on here.
So there's tons of ideas already. So even if you're thinking, well, you know, I'm not so sure about what phrases to use, go check out that website, and it has a lot of recommendations on phrases that you know they're already grammatically correct. And just make sure that you consider, where is your student at? Is he at a 2 or 3 word level? Should I be modeling 1 level up? Should I be modeling at a 4 icon sequencing level? Because he's at this level and I want to get them to the next level up. What other AAC competency do I want to target? Do I want to include code switching? Do I want to, you know, get communication repair breakdowns? Do I want to take turns in conversations? Just looking at all the different aspects and just making note of those. And how am I going to be supporting, like Rory says all the time, how are we going to be supporting the language of the home? By sending an activity home, by having something printed out from the website and put it in their backpacks, or uploading it to a messaging system. But let's keep it simple as we can, so we feel more successful and encouraged to keep trying in implementation. Rui, do you want to talk about more AI?
All right, so we're going to come up with an extension activity to work on who. So we already came up with some examples that we've found on the school year of core bilingual or bilingual list. But we're going to see what else we can develop with using technology. So we're going to work on snack time or lunchtime, and we're going to use AI. So I am going to ask you guys to open up your favorite chatbot or AI website. So you could use Copilot or ChatGPT or Google Gemini, whatever you like to use. And I'd like for you to copy and paste this prompt into the website. And then I want you to put your responses into the chat. And we're going to see what we can come up with. Oh, and I think we meant to adjust this for. So this is what we put in. So we're going to change, the theme is snack time or lunchtime. Okay. Oh, yes, I can definitely do that. That's a good idea. It's probably a little bit more efficient. So let's pick 24 sentences. And I'm going to put it into the chat. Oops. Let me send it to everyone. There we go.
you, Simone. So this is, ooh, has anyone shared yet? So these are the ones that I got, Brie. That's ChatGPT, but I'm curious to see from other people. Yeah. Has anyone tried like Gemini AI and see if you get something different, or Copilot?
Lots of good phrases in it. Seems like everyone was able to get a response pretty quickly. All right, so we got some easy phrases that we can use in therapy. Let's see. Go back here.
Right. I agree with you, Carrie. Maybe in the future.
We need to get some engineers involved.
Yeah. Maybe we need to reach out to the
There's
different.
got to be a way to build it in. I feel like one of these days it's going to happen. We need more teachers working in technology and AI. All right.
Yeah. So how fast was this?
Pretty fast, pretty darn fast. All right, so an extension activity that we can do, we might use predictive chart writing in the classroom. So we could, and maybe like some other ideas, people were talking about who's here at school already, so we already came up with some other ideas in other contexts and how we could work on who. But we could use, let me go back down here. So we can work on predictive chart writing, like who's here, Yvonne is here, Rui is here. We can also, whatever words that we're utilizing. So this is, extension, we're looking at other opportunities, and then also sharing it at home, what we did at school during therapy. So we can share the SMART chart or the visual word list with the parents and the family. We can also suggest to parents to work on words at home during a meal or I think this is from a previous activity. So during snack time, or if they're going, maybe what I would say is that when they're going places, like who are we going to see? Like we're going to a birthday party this weekend. Who are we going to see? Who's going to be there? Grandma's going to be there. Your cousin's going to be there. Your tia's going to be there. So maybe talking about events that are coming up, I think, is a good way to work on it. Other ways that we can target and incorporate the home language is maybe offering hybrid sessions if parents want to watch the therapy session, if that's feasible, if you're doing one-on-one with a child. And then for teachers, what they could work on is authentic writing using those predictive chart writing, predictive charts as well. So as always, we want to just put it into action, see how it goes, see what worked, what didn't work, and change as needed. So some additional ideas that we have for working on bilingual AAC is one of the things that I've been able to do throughout my district is coordinating parent AAC training workshops at your school or whatever setting that you're working in. That's been really successful. So once a quarter, we get together and we just, it's, during the school day, we borrow the students' devices for a period of time, and the parents are able to practice navigating the devices. We talk about different opportunities or routines throughout the day where they can be working on utilizing AAC at home. And I think the biggest thing with parents is just getting them more comfortable with navigating the devices, and also just reviewing any skills that they need to learn again. So if they want to add a new word and they forgot how, or if they really want to change a particular word, or change a pronunciation of a word, just helping them feel more comfortable with not only navigating, but maintaining and programming the device as well. I think that's something that's super helpful. We can also utilize joint planning worksheets. So one of the things that's also linked on the tablet is just a template that you could use. So for this one, I picked, I made this little template. It's just, let's learn the word put, like aprendemos poner. So we're going to look where put is on our device. And then what I've done with parents is that I come up, I usually have this section filled out, and then or I'm sorry, I give them some examples, and I have examples in English and then in Spanish here, and then I work with the parent to come up with ideas of like, okay, like, well, when do you think is a good idea to work on put? Like when do you want to talk about put, like when you're putting on clothes, or like what makes sense to you? And so I have them come up, and usually in the beginning it does feel a little bit like pulling teeth, like if they're not super comfortable with it, but with practice and like giving them ideas of different ways you can use the word, or like if you want to put something over here, and just giving them some examples, that, and then they eventually start generating some sentences on their own. And I think once they practice, just like us, once we practice it a little bit, we feel more comfortable doing it, and then we pick a routine when we're going to practice it, and then we just follow up the next week. So that's another option if you're working one-on-one with parents, or if you're working in a different setting like home health, can definitely be used. And then we have some other ideas for supporting AAC here.
That falls under that TrueDL, the translanguaging universal designs for learning. We want to be looking at the environment. How can we engineer the environment, provide access to that fringe vocabulary in both languages for continued support? And I had an example from an activity that we have done before on the story, what is it? Dragons Love Tacos, I think. So we had the visuals to support the different vocabulary that we're not necessarily targeting, but is needed for the activities. How do we provide the communication partner training, like Rui said? And I think specifically when you bring to the light which activity or in which context am I going to practice, I think that really helps them identify that one thing. Because when they say, I'm going to use it all the time, I'm going to practice it every day, and they can practice it every day and they can practice it all the time, they just stop. But if you pick this one setting, one activity, one time when they can do it, I think it just makes it more manageable for all communication partners, not just parents, but also school personnel. Creating a YouTube channel. If you guys have that creative, juice in you, go for it. That's a great idea. Creating your own Padlet and thinking about intervention models. It doesn't always have to be that direct. There's, depending on your setting, telepractice might be an option. Doing a hybrid session, synchronous and asynchronous, and incorporating this framework into pre-existing processes. Like maybe teachers have a lesson planned out. How can we incorporate our translanguaging framework into what the teacher is supporting in the classroom already? Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Yes, and then someone also commented that using the handout from earlier would be something that might be good with the parapros as well, to come up with different ways we could model. So, yeah, the more people we have modeling, the better. I think we all know that. All right. So that is the end of our presentation here. We do have a link to our references if you want to take a look at those. I did want to go back. Somebody asked about reading, recommended readings. I got too many windows going here. So if we go back to our Padlet here, if you go to bilingual, so we don't have any texts, unfortunately, that are on Bilingual AAC. Again, we have very limited research that is out there, but we do have some recommended readings that is under the Bilingual SLP resources, and it's just a Google Doc here with some texts that are, that are relevant to bilingual language development and supporting bilingual or bilingual and multilingual individuals with communication disorders, working with interpreters. We have some of our articles listed here. I think like those would be a good place to start. Are there any other texts that you would recommend, Yvonne? I'm gonna make sure this is shared.
No, I think you already have it under the references. The article by there's a recent one, but I think you already have it in the list. The one on translanguaging in action. I think it should be in there already. There's so many resources. I mean, you could spend an entire day just looking through everything that is in this Padlet. And we did a great job organizing it, because if it was up to me, it would just be all in there. So I think
to continue your learning. So I think those texts are a good place to start. If you're interested in learning more about bilingual issues in general, if you haven't checked out the Leaders Project, I highly recommend spending some time over there. Kate Crawley has put together an amazing website with tools, assessment tools, review of assessments. There's recordings of lectures. So there's a lot of good content here. Under social media, if that's your route of learning, there's some linked accounts here that talk about supporting AAC and diverse AAC. So these are a good place to look. So yeah, and if you haven't looked at Bilingual AAC, they're a phenomenal website. They've put together a number of great resources, and a lot of it's based on Dr. Soto's work. So, and they've got a lot of free tools and things that you can download and implement in therapy, or handouts for parents as well. So there's lots of good stuff. So we have a few minutes left here. So are there any questions that we can answer for folks?
Just have Ashley mention that she loves all the resources. Thank you. I'm also loving how quick that Dr. Soto prompt is building some word slates. Thank you so much. Yes, that prompt, it's been fun playing with that. And feel free to play with prompts. AI is only as good as we leverage into what we do. Thank you, Jessica. Try different prompts, try variations of it, try adding more details and see what you get, and look across different AI tools and compare lists for sure. Okay, that was a comment.
If anyone has a question or a comment that they'd like to make and would be more comfortable unmuting, please feel free to jump in.
Bree, there's a question you see by Caitlin Zarin that says, for those who are comfortable with the robust bilingual AAC systems and apps, could we talk a little about the strengths and weaknesses of maybe the top 3? I find that many of my AAC users' communications environment has other AAC users who are predominantly using word power in English and Spanish, but I find some limitations to this English and Spanish. What I know, it's like we're trying really hard to not be biased towards any AAC systems.
I mean, and I think it's the language piece is one thing. So I mean, we just have to look at feature matching. And so I really think it comes down to their whole communication, the communicator's profile, looking at what their access needs are, what their bodies are looking like, just how their brains work best. Do they really benefit from having something that has a strong motor plan base to it? And I think it's in terms of what's the best bilingual system. I'm sorry, I don't have a really good answer for that. I think
it's not a good answer.
It really just depends on looking at all of their communication needs. There's going to definitely be pluses and minuses to having a more categorical based system versus a motor planning focused system. I wear different hats. And so when I'm working in the school district, I think that there's certain systems that are working better for that context in terms of what we have available and can provide through a school district. And then I'm looking at different things when I'm also doing my Medicaid evaluations as well. And to be honest with you, a big part of it too is what the parent is going to be able to support and how much buy-in that there is there. Before, when I used to work in a clinic, there was a parent, I really wanted to introduce the child to AAC, and I brought it to some sessions, and I could just really tell how reticent the parent was. They really wanted their child to be verbal. They did not want to utilize AAC. And so I waited until she was ready. And it took almost a year, but by the time we did the evaluation, we were able to trial some different devices with the child, and there was a lot more buy-in, and then she was ready to, and then I will tell you from that day forward, that device came every single week to therapy. It went to school every single day. And so at that point in time, she's ready to support the device. And so while we want to support, early intervention with AAC, I think looking at the whole, what features are going to be best matched for the child, but also looking at their their social systems as well, and like how is that device going to be supported. And we know that the child can't do it alone, and so really looking at you know, the whole family support, and like, and what time is going to be best, and how we can support that family with using AAC at home. So I hate when people give answers like that because it's not a very direct and straightforward response, but that's the honest truth, is just really looking at feature matching.
And I would go online and, you know, try out the three of them, the three that you're thinking about. I think I already put at the beginning a link to Amazing Kids, I think is the website, and she does a great job just going through a bunch of the most robust bilingual AAC systems out there, and it goes through the different features. So take note of that and see which one resonates with you. And if you work in a specific setting where most of the communication partners are using a specific program, think about what system is going to be better supported in that setting. I mean, look at the family, like Rory said, that family is a big piece, the family buy-in, but also look at all the communication partners in the classroom that are going to be more comfortable with one device versus another. So it's a lot of things to take into consideration. And at the end of the day, what we hear from adult AAC users is that their AAC system is not one device. It's usually a combination of many devices. So as they get older and then they have the language skills to say, you know what, when I'm out and about, I just want to use my cell phone and Google Translate or whatever, speech to text or text to speech voice. But when I'm writing, I'm going to just use email. And when I'm in this setting, I'm going to use my symbol-based device. So it's just providing all these opportunities as they develop competencies with AAC. Any more questions? Oh, yeah, Caitlin. Sorry.
Oh my goodness, Rue, Yvonne, this has been an amazing afternoon. I personally have learned so much, and I can't wait to spend some dedicated time going through the Padlet. I can't thank you enough for being with us today and sharing your incredible knowledge and expertise on the subject. Just outstanding. Thank you so much. And then one last reminder, if you haven't yet signed in, we would love for you to take just a few seconds and fill that survey out. You can expect to get an email from us with a follow-up survey when you finish that session evaluation follow-up survey. It will generate your certificate of attendance. And then as soon as we're able to post a recording, we'll be happy to provide that as well.
Oh, Rui, there's one question by Kristen Simpson saying, what are your thoughts on trying to focus more on one or two if it's really not appropriate AAC systems in a pre-K system to facilitate teacher and peer comfort? I am trying that this year and have found amazing growth with one pair especially. And I think that's what Rui meant. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, Rui, but working in the school setting, it goes down to adult learning. You know, if we know that a big piece of AAC learning and competency comes on the opportunities the student has to use the AAC device and be supported are going to be reliant on who is supporting them. And we know with adult learning, they need things simplified. We need things simplified as we as adults, and using maybe learning the strategies to support AAC users on one or two systems over the gazillion of systems out there, it's going to help with buy-in. So for sure, in our district, we're using the specific language system first approach. You probably heard about it already, but we selected actually two systems, and those are the ones that we're using for our training with parapros and teachers. And if we have a student coming with a different device, we know that our parapros know the strategies, and because they can read, they can support whatever device comes in. But it's easier for sure to start building the competency of the communication partners when you just select one or two devices in that setting. Anything else you want to add, Rui?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. I agree.
Thank you.
All right. Again, I just can't say thank you enough. This has been wonderful. we'll
It
go
was our
ahead
pleasure.
and
Thank
if
you.
there are no other questions, then we'll go ahead and close the Zoom meeting. Okay, we'll be in touch.